There was a bell over a door on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia, and if you were there in the right year, at the right hour on a Thursday night, you would have heard it ring and looked up and seen a preacher walk in, still wearing his collar, tired around the eyes, and nobody at the counter would have said a word about it. They would have just kept eating, because that was normal there. That was just Thursday. There was a smell coming off a grill on U Street in Washington, D.C. That could pull a man 2 blocks out of his way just to walk past it one more time before he caught the bus home. There was a kitchen in New Orleans where a woman who wasn't famous yet, and would become famous, was cooking gumbo the same way her family had cooked it before anybody wrote down the recipe, because nobody needed to write it down. It lived in her hands. Family, these places existed. Real places, real addresses, real people standing behind real counters, feeding a community that had nowhere else in town. It was fully welcome. And one by one, not all at once, not with headlines, just quietly over years. Most of them closed, some burned, some got bought, some just stopped being able to hold on. And when they went, they didn't just take the fried chicken and the pie with them. They took the room where the movement got planned over coffee, the room where a family celebrated a graduation because there was nowhere else that would seat them like they mattered, the room where you could put your guard all the way down. Nobody wrote a headline the day most of these places closed. That's the part that sits heavy with me. Hey family, I'm James, and today we're going back to the tables, 20 of them, scattered across this country, from Atlanta to Harlem to Oakland. That history tried, in its quiet way, to let us forget. Now, before we get into it, if this is your first time sitting down at this table with me, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. We're building something here, family. A place where these rooms don't stay closed, they stay remembered. So, go on, hit subscribe, ring that bell, and let's walk through the door. Now, here's something I want you to sit with before we start walking city to city. These restaurants weren't in the business of just filling a plate. A plate of food is easy to forget. What's hard to forget is a room where you were never afraid. And that's what these 20 rooms were. That's the truth this whole video is built on, whether we say it out loud or not. Number 1. Busy Bee Cafe, Atlanta, Georgia. Opened in 1947, and if you were a student, a preacher, a musician, or a man just off a double shift, you knew the smell of that fried chicken before you ever turned onto the block. Crust the color of a well-worn penny, crackling loud enough you could hear it from 2 tables over. Chicken so tender, it gave up off the bone without a fight. The owners kept the lights bright and the coffee hot past midnight, because Busy Bee understood something a lot of places never learned. That some folks don't just need a meal, they need somewhere to sit a while and not be rushed out the door. Big Mama used to say a kitchen that keeps the lights on late is a kitchen that loves its people. Busy Bee loved its people for decades. It's still standing today, family, but so many of its sister spots on that same stretch of road did not make it, and that's the story we're here to tell. Number 2. Paschal's, Atlanta, Georgia. This wasn't just a restaurant. This was headquarters. Back in those days, when men like Dr. King and the young organizers around him needed a place to sit down, spread out papers, and plan a march without the whole world listening in, they went to the back tables at Paschal's. The owners, the Paschal brothers, didn't just serve them, they protected them, kept a table open, extended credit when the movement ran short on cash. That fried chicken sandwich became so famous, it got its own reputation, separate from the history happening around it. But family, you understand me? The chicken and the courage were served on the same plate. That restaurant closed its original doors, and the building changed hands more than once over the years. And something about a headquarters for freedom becoming just another storefront address. That's a kind of loss you don't get back with a plaque. Number 3. Mary Mac's Tea Room, Atlanta, Georgia. Now, Mary Mac's has had a complicated road, family, the neighborhood around it, and the hands running it shifted over the decades. And I won't smooth over that complexity for you, because you deserve the truth. But underneath all of that sits something simple and real. The recipes that made that tea room famous, the pot liquor, the peach cobbler, the mac and cheese baked golden on top. Those recipes carry the fingerprints of black cooks who built that reputation dish, by dish, meal by meal, whether their names ever made it onto a menu or not. That's a pattern you'll hear again and again tonight. The hands that built the flavor and the name on the sign didn't always match, and that mismatch is its own kind of erasure. Number 4. Gladys Knight's Chicken and Waffles, Atlanta, Georgia. Now this one's a little more recent than most of tonight's stops, but stay with me, because it belongs here. When a woman who already had a Grammy on her shelf decided to open a restaurant serving crispy fried chicken, laid right up against a golden waffle drowning in syrup, she wasn't inventing something new. She was reaching back and pulling a Sunday morning after Saturday night tradition out of black church culture and putting it on a plate for the world to taste. That restaurant became a gathering spot in its own right before it eventually closed its doors. And folks who ate there still talk about the sound of that dining room on a weekend morning. Laughter stacked on laughter, forks against plates, somebody's cousin greeting somebody's auntie 2 tables over. You won't see that today, not in that building. The space moved on to something else. The sound didn't move with it. Number 5. The Apex Museum Dining Hall, Atlanta, Georgia. This wasn't a restaurant in the traditional sense, family, but I'm putting it on this list because it did something the others did too. It fed a community spirit and its stomach in the same room. Built to preserve black history right there on Auburn Avenue, the dining hall inside it served food while surrounding you with the story of how you got there. Portraits on the wall, timelines along the hallway. You could eat a plate of greens and look up and see the face of somebody who marched, so you could sit comfortably in that chair. That's a kind of restaurant this country doesn't build much of anymore. One where the walls teach you something, while the kitchen feeds you. Now, before we keep moving, family, I want to pause here and ask you something. Every one of these places I'm naming, somebody's grandmother walked through that door. Somebody's granddaddy proposed in a booth like one of these. What's the restaurant in your family's history? Maybe not famous, maybe you can't even find a photo of it anymore. That meant something like this? Drop the name in the comments if you remember it. I read every single one, and I promise you, somebody else out there is going to see that name and feel their chest tighten a little, because they remember it too. Number 6. Dooky Chase's restaurant, New Orleans, Louisiana. If Paschal's was the strategy room, Dooky Chase's was the sanctuary. Leah Chase ran that kitchen for the better part of 70 years, and what she built there was Creole cooking elevated to something the whole world eventually wanted a taste of. But it started as a place where black New Orleans could sit in a dining room with real tablecloths and real art on real walls, at a time when most doors in that city were closed to them entirely. Civil rights leaders ate strategy sessions over her gumbo. Musicians ate between sets. The paintings on those walls, real work by real black artists, turned that dining room into something closer to a museum you could taste. That restaurant survived floodwater, survived decades of change, and still family, so much of what surrounded it. The other kitchens on that same stretch of the city that didn't have a Leah Chase to carry them through, those are gone. Vanished into the wet ground of a city that's already lost too much. Number 7. Two Sisters Kitchen, New Orleans, Louisiana. A humbler spot than Dooky Chase's, but no less loved by the people who walk through its door every week. Gumbo thick enough to stand a spoon in. Fried chicken with a batter recipe, two sisters guarded like it was written in a family Bible. This was the kind of place where the cook knew your order before you sat down, where a bad day got a little lighter just from the smell hitting you on the sidewalk outside. Places like this rarely make the history books. Family, they don't have a famous name attached, no civil rights meeting held in the back booth that anybody wrote down. They just fed a neighborhood faithfully for years, until one day they couldn't anymore, and the neighborhood had to learn to live without that smell on the corner. Number 8. The Pink House, Charleston, South Carolina. Now this building is old, family, older than most of what we'll talk about tonight. Built back when the hands doing the cooking in Charleston's finest kitchens were enslaved hands, working recipes that would later be claimed by names that weren't theirs. That's a wound this whole list carries underneath it, whether the restaurant is standing today or gone. The rice dishes, the seafood stews, the okra and tomato skillets that built low country cuisine's reputation. That food came from somewhere. It came from women and men in aprons who never got their names on a menu, whose descendants generations later sometimes found their way back into kitchens like that one, reclaiming with pride what was taken without a word of thanks. Number 9. Ben's Chili Bowl, Washington, D.C. Opened in 1958 on U Street in family, this is one of the great survival stories on tonight's list. But I'm putting it here because surviving doesn't mean untouched. Ben's watched the 1968 riots burn down half the businesses around it and stayed open through the smoke, defeating firefighters and neighbors alike. It watched segregation, then watched U Street get called Black Broadway in its prime, then watched decades of decline hit that same street hard, then watched gentrification price out half the community that built its reputation in the first place. The half-smoked chili dog stayed the same through all of it. But look around Ben's today, family, at the boutique storefronts and the sky-high rent on that same U Street, and you'll understand that survival isn't the same thing as the neighborhood surviving with it. Number 10, Sylvia's Restaurant, Harlem, New York. Sylvia Woods opened her doors in 1962, and what she built became the closest thing soul food ever had to a royal court. Presidents ate there, musicians ate there. But so did the woman who cleaned office buildings downtown all week and wanted one Sunday meal that tasted like home. Sylvia understood something that made her restaurant last where so many others folded. She never let the prices climb so high that her own neighbors couldn't afford a seat at her table. That's a discipline, family. That's a woman choosing community over maximum profit, decade after decade, in a city that rewards exactly the opposite instinct. Now, family, we're halfway through tonight's map, and I need to stop us here for just a minute, because there's something I want to make sure doesn't get lost in all these names and addresses. Every single one of these restaurants I've told you about, they're not just old menus and closed storefronts. They're proof of a whole world of ordinary black genius that this country has never fully written down anywhere permanent. And that's exactly why I put together something called the Soul Roots Cookbook, 100 Forgotten Black American Recipes, written out complete. The ingredients, the measures, and yes, the little secrets Big Mama never once wrote on a card because she never thought she needed to. This video is a piece of what we almost lost. The cookbook is the rest of the map. The link's in the description and pinned right up in the comments. You can scan the code on your screen too if that's easier for you. Don't let these recipes go the way some of these restaurants went. Number 11. The Sunset Cafe, Chicago, Illinois. Up in Bronzeville during the Great Migration years, the Sunset Cafe was where jazz and soul food and black nightlife all lived under one roof. Back before most of America had a word for what a supper club even was. Musicians who'd go on to be legends played sets there while the kitchen sent out ribs and greens to tables full of folks who'd come north chasing a better life and found, at least for one night a week, a room that felt like celebration instead of survival. That building changed hands and changed purpose more than once over the decades. The music moved somewhere else. The plates moved with it. Number 12. Leon's Bar-B-Q, Chicago, Illinois. The smell of that pit smoke could tell you exactly where you were on the south side without you needing a street sign. Leon's built its name on slow-cooked ribs and rib tips chopped up and doused in a tangy red sauce that families argued about for generations. Too sweet? Not sweet enough? Everybody had an opinion, and everybody kept coming back anyway. Places like Leon's weren't fancy, weren't trying to be. They were the corner spot where a man picked up dinner on the way home from the plant, where teenagers hung around outside on a summer evening because the smell alone was better company than an empty house. Folks don't do this anymore. Line up on a sidewalk for barbecue smoked the old way. And that's a shame, family. That's a real shame. Number 13, Valley Soul Food, Detroit, Michigan. Detroit in its working years ran on the auto plants, and Valley's ran on Detroit. Cornbread hot enough to melt the butter the second it touched it. Sweet tea poured strong. A dining room full of men coming off shift with grease still under their fingernails, sitting down to a plate that told them, without a word, that somebody cared whether they made it through the week. My granddaddy worked 6 days a week and never once complained, and I think about men like him every time I picture a place like Valley's. A spot that understood exhausted men needed more than calories. They needed to feel for 30 minutes, like the world hadn't worn them all the way down. Number 14, Central Avenue, Los Angeles, California. Now this one's not a single restaurant, family, it's a whole corridor of them. A strip of black-owned businesses in the 1940s and 50s that hummed with more restaurants, clubs, and diners per block than almost anywhere else on the West Coast. Fried fish spots, soul food counters, late-night diners that fed musicians coming off stage past midnight. And then the freeway came through. Urban renewal came through. Block by block, that corridor got carved up and hollowed out in the name of progress. And most of what made Central Avenue simply stopped existing. Folks who remember it will tell you it wasn't torn down by accident. It was in the way of something the city wanted more. Number 15, A&A Bar-B-Q, Oakland, California. During the years the Black Panther Party was organizing free breakfast programs and building community power across Oakland, spots like A&A were where that same community gathered outside of the meetings. Over ribs, over conversation, over the simple act of eating together in a place that was theirs. This was food as fuel for a movement that understood survival and dignity were the same fight. When places like this closed, the community didn't just lose a restaurant. It lost one more room where organizing happened over a shared plate instead of a screen. Now, family, real quick, before we keep going, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button if any part of what you've heard so far brought a memory back for you. Go on and subscribe if you haven't yet, so you're here with me every single time we do this. And down in the comments, tell me, is there a restaurant like this from your own city? One that closed before you ever got the chance to eat there again? One you wish you could walk into just one more time? I want to hear the name. I want to hear what you'd order. Number 16, Mabel's Smokehouse, Brooklyn, New York. Now this one's a little different, family. It's Memphis-style barbecue transplanted into New York City. And I put it on this list because it tells its own quiet story about migration. Black families carried their smoke and their seasoning north and west for generations, rebuilding a taste of home in cities that never asked for it, but were better for having it. The pitmasters who built spots like this were keeping something alive across 1,000 miles of distance. A flavor memory strong enough to survive the trip. Number 17, Wade's Restaurant, a name you'll hear echoed across the Deep South in one small town after another. Wherever a family turned a front room or a converted gas station into a place folks trusted for Sunday dinner during the week. At a Wade's, the mac and cheese wasn't a side dish. It was treated like scripture, baked, not boiled. A crust on top you had to fight for. Every family had strong opinions about whose mac and cheese was closest to correct. And a good Wade's could settle an argument just by putting a forkful in front of you. Number 18, Easy's Soul Food, Miami, Florida. Down where the Gulf breeze mixes into everything, Easy's served fried whiting and mullet alongside mashed potatoes rich enough to be dessert. In a dining room that held together a Black Miami community that outsiders rarely knew existed behind the postcards of the beach. That whole coastal identity, black, working, proud, fed on fish caught close to home, rarely gets told in the story America tells about Florida. Easy's told it every single day, one plate at a time. Number 19, strictly soul food and family. I'm naming this one the way so many of you would recognize it because there wasn't just one. There were hundreds scattered along southern roadsides, small cinder block buildings, with a hand-painted sign and a screen door that never quite stopped creaking. These were the places where Sunday felt like it lasted all week, where the smell of collards cooking down with smoked turkey neck could reach you from the parking lot before you even opened that screen door. That was just how it was done. You didn't need a reservation. You needed a Sunday and an appetite, and people you loved sitting across the table from you. Number 20, the Booker T. Washington diner spots, small community counters, sometimes with barely a sign out front, that never had a famous name attached to the building, but had the exact tempo of a whole generation's memory baked into every single plate they served. No historic marker. No documentary crew ever came through to film the counter stools. Just a family standing behind a grill for decades, feeding whoever walked in like they were feeding their own. And when a place like that closes, family. No article gets written, no news crew shows up. It just goes quiet. And one day you drive past where it used to be, and there's a parking lot there now, or a chain store, or nothing at all, and you're the only one left who remembers the sound the door used to make. Family, you've stayed with me through all 20 of these, through Atlanta and New Orleans and Harlem and Detroit and all the way out to Oakland. And that tells me something about you. It tells me you understand this was never really about the food, it's about the rooms. Every one of these restaurants, famous or forgotten, was a room where a whole people got to breathe a little easier for an hour. Plan a movement? Celebrate a graduation. Bury a loved one and come sit together afterward with something warm in front of them. I know some of you are thinking, I'll look into my own family's history one of these days. I'll ask my auntie about that little diner she used to mention. Family, I've been doing this long enough to know that one of these days sometimes never comes. And the people who remember these rooms are getting older every single year. That's exactly why I put together the Soul Roots Cookbook. 100 recipes, written out complete, the way these very kitchens might have made them, with every tip and every secret included. So at least the flavor of these rooms never has to close its doors again. You can keep relying on memory alone, hoping it holds. Or you can have it written down, preserved the right way, starting today. The link's in the description, pinned in the comments, and the code's right there on your screen if that's easier. I did my part putting this together. The rest is yours, family. Share this one with somebody in your family who still talks about a restaurant like this. The one your uncle mentions every Thanksgiving. The one your grandmother swears nothing today can match. This might be the nudge that gets them finally telling that whole story out loud. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because next week we're walking into another room this country tried to let go. Quiet, and I want you standing right here with me when we open that door. Family, you're the ones who remember. You're the ones making sure the door stays open, even after the building's long gone. I'll see you next time, family.